Do you really think a country everyone warned you about could end up being the place you never want to leave? That's the question a wave of European travelers landed in the United States asking themselves this year. And by the time they boarded their flights home, most of them didn't have an answer they were proud of. If you're new here, this is part of an ongoing series looking at what happens when European visitors actually experience America for themselves instead of just hearing about it secondhand. So go ahead and hit subscribe now, because the stories only get more surprising from here.
Are 3 things that Americans find normal but British people are shocked about. Number 1 is that strangers are so friendly in America. When we went traveling there, every person that we passed in the street pretty much said hello, and we would stop talking to them for 5 to 10 minutes in the best way possible. We had the best conversations. That doesn't necessarily happen in the UK. Number 2 is refillable drinks. When you go to restaurants or pubs in the US, you get free refillable drinks.
For years, the script has been the same. Europeans grow up hearing that America is loud, exhausting, unsafe, and somehow behind the times, despite being the most powerful economy on the planet. Then World Cup season rolled around, stadiums filled with fans from Scotland, England, Germany, France, Sweden, and the Netherlands. And something strange started happening. The comment sections, the group chats, the travel vlogs, they all started sounding less like warnings and more like confessions. Take the story of a Scottish fan who flew into Atlanta expecting the worst version of an American airport experience. Long lines, cold service, chaos. Instead, he found himself being walked personally to his connecting gate by an airline staffer who noticed he looked lost, and by the time he reached security, a stranger ahead of him in line had already paid for his coffee just because they liked his accent. He posted about it that same night, admitting online that he'd spent his whole life picturing Americans as cold and transactional, and that picture had lasted about 90 minutes on the ground. Then there's the story that's been floating around from a small diner outside Nashville, where a group of English tourists sat down expecting a quick, forgettable meal before their next stop. The owner overheard them mention it was one of their birthdays, disappeared into the kitchen, and came back not just with a free dessert, but with half the restaurant singing along.
What do you mean?
Look at this, everything is underwater. It's like a swamp.
Oh yeah, that's just irrigation.
Irrigation for what?
For the trees.
Ah, what's all this funness? So we've got homemade bread, we've got homemade wok there, we've got, I think this is coffee.
How did it know that? You guys just have animals just walking around, like there's just a turkey.
One of the tourists later admitted in a video that he'd never been sung to by strangers in his life, and that the moment felt less like customer service and more like being adopted, briefly, by an entire town. And it isn't just civilians. Police officers keep showing up in these stories too, which throws a lot of Europeans completely off balance. Because back home, an officer walking up to you usually means something's wrong. A German couple wandering through downtown Nashville after a match got approached by 2 officers who noticed they looked lost, and instead of asking for ID or moving them along, the officers spent 10 minutes cracking jokes, pointing them toward the best barbecue in town, and posing for a photo before sending them on their way. The couple later described it as the friendliest interaction they'd ever had with law enforcement anywhere in the world, in any country, ever. Multiply these moments by the thousands of tourists who came through for the tournament, and you start to see a pattern that surveys have picked up on for years. Visitor satisfaction numbers for hospitality in the U.S. consistently rank near the top globally, even as the country's international reputation for friendliness lags behind smaller, quainter destinations. There's a gap between the stereotype and the lived experience, and that gap is exactly what's fueling this entire wave of reaction content. So here's the first question for you. Would you rather live somewhere polite but reserved, where strangers keep a respectful distance, or somewhere loud and a little chaotic, where a stranger might just buy your coffee for no reason at all? Because hospitality is only the beginning. The thing that seems to break European brains almost immediately is scale. Not military scale, not political scale, just the sheer physical size of everything.
Something I love about America is the patriotism.
Like, look at this flag. Look at it.
Before coming here, I thought patriotism was something that you only see in the movies. And then I came here and you see the flag everywhere. On people's house, neighborhoods, on businesses. Sometimes you like drive your car on the highway and you see a huge flag. And like there's something so cool about people feeling genuinely proud of their country.
Anyway,
A French tourist walking into a Buck Seas off the interstate in Texas described it less like a gas station and more like an airport terminal that happened to sell beef jerky, with dozens of fuel pumps, a wall of food options, and a bathroom so clean it went viral on its own. Back home, a big gas station might have 4 pumps and a small fridge of drinks. Here, it's practically a small city block. Supermarkets do the same thing to visitors. A Dutch couple walking through a Texas grocery store filmed themselves standing in the cereal aisle for almost a full minute, overwhelmed by the sheer number of options stretching down a single row longer than most European stores in their entirety. Portion sizes get the same reaction.
thank you. You're welcome. Whoa. Here we are.
What do you think?
Wow. That's a good burger.
A medium soda in an American fast food chain is often larger than a large back home, and the free refills concept alone has been enough to leave more than one tourist visibly stunned on camera. Then there are the trucks. European visitors are used to compact cars squeezing through narrow medieval streets, so watching a full-size American pickup truck pull into a parking spot next to them tends to produce the same reaction every single time, a mix of disbelief and, oddly, admiration. One Swedish tourist joked in a since viral clip that he felt like he needed a stepladder just to see over the hood of the truck parked next to his rental car. Multiply that feeling by interstates that stretch 6 lanes wide in each direction, stadiums that seat over 100,000 people, and home appliances that look industrial by European standards. And you start to understand why so many visitors describe their first week in America as sensory overload in the best possible way. Would you rather have compact efficiency everywhere you go, or the kind of abundance that makes you feel like the entire country was built assuming bigger is always better? That sense of scale doesn't stop at the parking lot. It follows visitors straight into nature. And this is where a lot of Europeans quietly admit their entire mental map of the country was wrong. Most Europeans, when they picture America, picture cities New York, Los Angeles, maybe Chicago. What almost none of them picture, until they see it themselves, is a national park system spanning over 84 million acres, or the fact that you can drive for 8 straight hours in some states and never leave the same state.
In America in like 3 months, and I've been here a long time, right? So I've just been to the I've just been to the grocery store. It's like the movies, right? I paid for all my, stuff that I bought, and he gave me one of these bags. This is the bags they have in the movies. When they get in and they're like, time to feed the children.
A group of German backpackers who extended their World Cup trip into a road trip through the American Southwest described standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon and feeling something close to vertigo. Not from the height, but from the scale nearly 280 miles long, up to 18 miles wide, and old enough that Europe's entire written history barely registers as a blip against its geological age. One of them admitted that growing up, he'd always assumed Europe held a monopoly on breathtaking, ancient landscapes, and that assumption didn't survive first contact with the American West. Time zones alone tend to break people's brains a little.
At the absolute state of this, the most famous pizza in town. First of all, underneath, nice and charred. You can fold it like a New York style, but it's pretty crispy under there, loaded with pepperoni and cheese. Let's go for it.
A Swedish tourist trying to plan a call home realized that flying from New York to Los Angeles crosses 3 time zones without ever leaving the country. A distance comparable to flying from London most of the way to Moscow, entirely inside one nation's borders. Add in the wildlife elk wandering through mountain towns, alligators in Florida drainage ditches, bison blocking traffic in Yellowstone, and you get a country that keeps surprising visitors with just how much room it actually has to be strange, beautiful, and occasionally a little bit dangerous, all before anyone's even talked about the cities. Which brings up the safety question directly. because it's the one European travelers arrive most nervous about. The stereotype, fed by headlines and viral news clips, is that America is a place where danger lurks around every corner. And then tourists actually get there, and what they find, more often than not, is clean, orderly streets, visible and approachable police presence at major events, and crowds that, despite their size, move with a kind of practiced calm that catches visitors off guard. During the World Cup matches, host cities deployed massive security operations, and multiple European fans commented afterward on just how smoothly it all moved. Clear signage, friendly volunteers at every checkpoint, and officers who seem more interested in taking photos with fans than intimidating them. A French fan admitted he'd packed extra caution into his trip, avoiding certain neighborhoods based purely on secondhand warnings, only to find those same neighborhoods full of families, street vendors, and evening joggers going about completely ordinary lives. Would you rather trust the headlines, or trust what you see with your own eyes once you're actually standing there?
Whether it's the Scottish in Boston who are tearing it up and making themselves loud and proud, or it's the Japanese clearing up stadiums after games, the world is coming together and it is such a beautiful thing to see. So, hey, if you're out there and you see someone from a foreign country or...
Of course, no honest conversation about America skips the economy, because this is where the numbers get personal fast. A hotel worker in Orlando, interviewed during the tournament rush, described earning a base wage supplemented heavily by tips, often taking home more in a single World Cup weekend than she'd typically earn in 2 normal weeks, combined a detail that stunned several European tourists used to fixed service charges and no tipping culture at all. For many Europeans, the entire concept of tipping as a meaningful part of someone's income is foreign, and watching it play out in real time, generosity flowing directly from tourist to worker, reframed how some of them thought about service economies altogether. Home ownership stories carry a similar punch. A Texan homeowner interviewed by a travel vlogger described purchasing a 3-bedroom house with a yard for a price that, converted to euros, would barely cover a 1-bedroom apartment deposit in parts of Western Europe.
Look, I've got a lot to say about America in terms of the sugar content that they allow, some of the weird things that go on in their country, sure. But this?
Healthcare costs, on the other hand, cut the opposite direction. Several tourists brought up the fact that a single emergency room visit in the US can cost more than an entire month's rent back home. A sobering reminder that abundance in one area doesn't always mean abundance in every area. It's not a simple story of better or worse. It's a country of extremes, where the same system that lets a hotel worker double her income in a single weekend is the same system that can bankrupt someone over a broken arm. Would you rather have lower costs with less earning potential, or higher earning potential with real financial risk hanging over you? And somehow, through all of that complexity, there's still something that ties it together, something almost every European visitor comments on whether they mean to or not: the sheer amount of visible, unembarrassed patriotism. Flags on porches, flags on pickup trucks, flags painted onto the sides of barns in the middle of nowhere. In most of Europe, overt nationalism carries heavy historical baggage, so visitors are often initially uneasy seeing an American flag on every third house. But that unease tends to fade fast once they realize it isn't aggressive. It's more like enthusiasm.
I'm a Brit living in America, and these are the biggest culture shocks that I found living in the US.
There's things first, the mailboxes. The mailboxes here really are like the movies. They're kind of just outside your house. You don't have a letterbox. And also, people do love an American flag.
You don't really see anybody in the UK put a British flag outside their house, but here it's more normal to have a flag outside your house than not. Most houses in the UK, I would say, are townhouses or semi-detached houses. I grew up in that typical brick semi-detached house, where here...
A Dutch tourist described attending a small-town 4th of July adjacent celebration during his trip, and being stunned that literally the entire town turned out. Kids waving flags, an actual marching band, and a genuine, unironic singing of the national anthem that gave him chills, despite not being American himself. He admitted afterward that back home, that kind of unguarded public pride would feel almost embarrassing. But here it felt like something closer to community glue. A shared identity loud enough to hold together a country, this physically massive and this culturally diverse. That contradiction, a country of extremes somehow held together by pride, scale, and a strange collective optimism is part of what keeps drawing people back for a second look. Food culture deserves its own moment here too, because it's one of the most immediate, sensory ways visitors experience the country. Drive-through culture, alone, throws people off the idea of ordering an entire meal without leaving your car, then eating it in a parking lot within minutes. Still feels almost futuristic to visitors from cities built around walking and public transit. A British tourist filmed his first Waffle House experience at 2 in the morning after a match, describing the sheer speed and chaos of the open kitchen as dinner theater, and admitted the hash browns alone were worth the flight. Regional food identity surprised people too. Barbecue meaning something completely different in Texas than in the Carolinas. Tex-Mex tasting nothing like anything back home. And portion sizes at diners routinely arriving as 2 or even 3 meals worth of food by European standards. One Swedish visitor joked that he'd ordered what he thought was a personal appetizer and received what looked like a family platter. Multiply these small culture shock moments across dozens of meals over a 2 or 3 week trip, and you get travelers who go home not just with photos, but with an entirely recalibrated sense of what a normal meal even means. By the end of these trips, something consistent starts showing up across almost every story, a kind of quiet, reluctant apology. Travelers who arrived braced for rudeness, danger, and disappointment leave admitting, often on camera, that they were wrong, or at least that the picture they'd built in their heads didn't match a single day of what they actually lived through. It's not that every stereotype is false. Big countries have big problems, and nobody's pretending otherwise. It's that the gap between expectation and experience turned out to be wide enough to genuinely humble people who came in feeling a little superior about it. So here's the real question, the one worth sitting with after everything you've just heard. Would you rather travel somewhere that matches your expectations exactly? No surprises, no discomfort, or somewhere big and messy and occasionally overwhelming that has a real shot at changing your mind about something you thought you already understood? If you've made it this far, you already know which answer keeps people watching videos like this one. If this kind of story hit different for you, do us a favor, like the video, share it with someone who still thinks they've got America figured out, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one in this series. Before you go, one quick note. This video is a compilation built from public social media clips, travel vlogs, tourist interviews, and general reporting around World Cup 2026 tourism, brought together for entertainment and discussion. It reflects individual experiences and reactions, not the full social reality, government policy, or official statistics of any country involved. Costs, wages, and figures mentioned are illustrative and can vary significantly by location, season, and personal circumstance. This channel isn't responsible for decisions anyone makes based on its travel, financial, or otherwise, and we'd encourage anyone genuinely curious to dig into more sources and, where possible, go see it for themselves.